Hey, my name's Petey. Welcome to Storytime. This is B's Chicken Farm and Kay's 40th birthday. So the main players in this story is going to be Badger, the dog. That was my older brother Eric's dog. His wife Carol, my little brother Bjorn, my wife Donna, my mom, the rest of the family. We lived in Willow Springs on this pipeline, which was like a prairie, strip prairie that had high tension wires on the top, and below ground it had a gas pipeline. So that was like BMX, riding, jumping, and motorcycles when we got older. So this was like an ideal place to grow up. And later on, my brother was like married. He had this wild dog named Badger. He might have been dating his wife, but yeah, he had this wild dog that would run around and he would like slap his thighs and do this chant, and the dog was just ape shit, crazy, bananas dog. And he would bring it by our place, and the dog would really go nuts. I think that dog lived for a while. He like couldn't really keep it because it was too wild, so it was here by my mom's. And he had brought these. He was doing a lot of coke, like it was the '80s, and he was really partying a lot. So he thought it was a good idea to get these hay bales and put them around where the garden used to be. You know, like my mom kind of got a little bit too old to do that giant ass garden. Basically, she lost her slave labor. I grew up a little bit. I was like, 18, and I'm like, I'm not doing that shit anymore. And so that turned into B's Chicken Farm. B was Badger the dog, who was just foaming at the mouth, leaping and tail never stop wagging, running around, crazed eyes. And so he got these chickens and he put these hay bales around and put the chickens in there like they're going to stay. And of course, the chickens just dispersed themselves. They were just like, come on! And they just went out everywhere, all of the neighborhood. And this dog went bananas chasing the chickens, running through everyone's yard. And the chickens are running, and the dog's nipping at them, and they're and the dogs, So they eventually were like calling the cops, and the cops came to my mom's house. And was like, "What's with this chicken farm? You got this rabid dog running around, and it's not good." So she told my brother that's enough, and he took my gun. I had a Remington Plinker, 22 that held 13, and he went out there. He would put his foot on the head of the chicken and then shoot it in the neck. And the chicken's got his head's hanging half on and off, and it started running around. You hear that running around with the chicken with his head cut off? That's true. They do. They run around a lot. And and I'm not. Please don't think that I'm saying this is good. What he did. You want to hear bad? I'm leaving out. There's stories I could tell. Believe me, you don't want to know. You don't want to know what he did. But this poor chicken did a triple somersault, and the blood came out all over my little brother's face. So that carcass of that chicken became Badger's favorite plaything, and it was the dog was constantly running around with this dead chicken in its mouth, and just and the feathers and meat would go flying. And it was a thing. This dog was running around. People would be trying to go to work, and it would be running through their driveway. The feathers flying, rotten meat. So my mom was like, "You've got to take care of that." It was just like my mom, poor mom. So my brother went out there and went and hid it. I'm like, you need to just grab a shovel. And like, how hard is it to bury? It's not burying a dog. It's burying a chicken. It's like 6 shovelfuls, and then and you're done. So he's got a better idea. He never listens to me. So he just takes it and puts it under a rock, And then winter comes and snow time and everything's fine, and then the snow starts to melt and the chicken comes back. After the whole winter, the whole deep freeze and thaw out, here comes Badger. With the chicken again. This chicken is like a villain in a horror movie. You can't keep it down. No matter what you do to it, it comes back. So, yeah, that was B's Chicken Farm. And then, it warmed up as March 25th is Bjorn's birthday. That's my little brother, Bjorn. B, Badger, that was the dog. B's Chicken Farm. Didn't work out well for those chickens. And Badger, I don't know what happened with that dog. It's like it just, one day it wasn't around. So I'm guessing it got the 22. So, because he loved killing. My brother loved killing stuff. So, anyway, especially little animals. He loved killing animals. So, yeah. And if it was painful, more painful, then that was get the neighborhood kids around. Charge admission. So, he had gone through this phase of building pipe bombs with match heads, and then that moved on to acid bombs. Like my niece was on an ATV, and he snuck out there with his his acid bomb. And I'm not going to tell you how to make any of that stuff. I'll just say that it went off, and the acid got all over her leg, and she was screaming. She was screaming. Luckily for him, that wasn't my kid. It was my younger brother's kid that got the acid bomb. But my wife and I wouldn't. We kind of really helicoptered when we were all together to make sure that he wasn't using our kids as bait, because he always had some. Like there was the fire department. The fire chief was a guy. He had a son named Jimmy, and he had another kid race him in this pipeline on bikes, and it was all a setup. The race was supposed to start here, and they were supposed to race to here. And at this point, my brother was laying in the weeds with a fucking battery box with a switch with wires running out to it, going to two pipe bombs that were buried under the ground. And he threw the switch, and these pipe bombs took this kid's twin Stingray out. And then the kid's telling his dad, yeah, the army must have been testing, what do you call those, claymore mines in the pipeline. And the dad has been drinking. You're lying. Whoosh, So, yeah, he did that one. And then it was Bjorn's birthday. And he had this aerial bomb. And that's like in fireworks at the end when they do the finale. And it's boom, 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 boom. The ones that set off car alarms and shake your house. You have to buy medicine for your dog. That's an aerial bomb. They're not the colored ones. These are, you just see a flash of light, and then there's a delay, and then you hear this unbelievably loud, bassy explosion. That's an aerial bomb, and he got a hold of one. A Class C, like a real legit firework. And I was like, we need to find a tube. Because you're supposed to put that in a tube, and then there's like the wick. It's real long. It comes out of the tube, and you hook it up to an igniter, which is electronic ignition system. And basically, that's just like a filament, like what's in a light bulb, that's wrapped around a match, like a big Ohio blue tip match. So when the power comes, this filament gets red hot, and that sets off the match, which burns nice flaming fire and hits the wick. That's how they do that. So. And he had figured out how to do all that stuff from using model rocket igniters and M80 wick. And that's how he did the electronic ignition system for those pipe bombs. Well, this was me and him, made a rocket warhead with a 22 round in it and a can of butane to refill a lighter. So we were always doing stuff like that. The acid bomb thing, like I showed my buddy, and he went to the recycling center and filled his whole car up with 2 liters and sat out there. His parents were in Florida, and he sat out there drinking beer and smoking weed in his yard and kept doing those bombs. And all of that acid soaked into his grass. And then when the rain came, it killed all of the whole lawn died. The whole back lawn died, and it never came back. It was major property damage on that home, and it looked like a UFO landed because of him sitting out there smoking his weed and then throwing these bottles out there. He threw so many of them that it just covered the whole lawn in a circle. And wherever that acid went, when the rain came, it activated it, and it just killed everything. So yeah, there was always like a wake of destruction, like fallout that followed my brother's activity. And in this one, I think I really damaged my hearing because he had insisted. I'm like, we got to get a tube. We need to launch this aerial bomb. We don't want to do it on the ground. And he's just insistent on doing it on the ground. So it's my little brother Bjorn's birthday. I'm telling everybody, you guys need to cover your ears and go in the house. That we have a patio door where you can see it. You'll be able to hear it and feel it. It's so unbelievably loud. So we get this thing. He digs out the top of the hay bale from B's Chicken Farm and puts the aerial bomb facing down. And then the wick came unfolded. It was weird. It was like they had sewn together almost like brown paper bag material, like paper. This was a paper thing, and it had like shipping twine stitched around, and even on the wick, these sections of wick that unfolded. And so that was real nice and neat. And we are out there. He lights this thing, and he goes back like 15 feet and stops. And I'm like, no, we need to go. Like, he's like, yeah, you think so? And of course, we're both giddy because the wick is lit. And anytime you're in an activity like this, there's that short time where the wick is lit and you're like high, like you're literally like goofy. And so he agrees with me and comes back. And then I put my hands over here. He goes, oh, you're putting your hands over here? So I'm like, yeah, I want to be able to hear. And so we both put our hands over our ears, and all of a sudden, and nothing. And I'm thinking, it just crossed my head like this is a mistake. Don't go walking up there. He puts his hands down and goes walking up there. And of course, we're not realizing that it's in this tube, and it does this to shoot it up in the air. That's the first charge. It doesn't go boom. It goes to shoot it up. Then there's a delay. Then there's the big boom. So he puts his hands down and goes walking up there to go, smell the wick to see if it's lit. And we get like 10 feet away from this thing, and it goes off. And I'll tell you, the hay bale disappeared. And what we heard was so loud that my ears rang for weeks. I couldn't hear anything. My ears were ringing so loud, and I had no hearing. And what I felt was, it was like this thick. I kept saying, it was this thick. It was a shock wave. It was like a bass note that moved through your body. You could feel it. It was like 3 feet thick, and it moved. And that was so amazing. Like we could not stop laughing. It was so funny. And they were freaking out at first, but then they realized we were laughing. So everyone was laughing. It was the funniest thing, but now I've got like this unbelievable ringing in my ear. So the other one where I probably did some damage to my ear was Carol's 40th birthday, and that was he had gotten this job at an Infinity dealer, and they had a recall on all their airbags for these cars. And it's a $10,000 fine for the dealership if they throw away an airbag and don't discharge it. They're supposed to blow it off, then throw it away. Because it's an explosive. It's not like an M80. It's like 10 M80s. It's really powerful. It's like a quarter stick of dynamite to blow that bag out to save your life. It's really an intense explosion. And so it's basically it's a metal pipe, and then it'll have a couple of vents where the air comes out, and there'll be some wires coming off of it. So I ended up getting that job. He's got a cocaine thing, so he was never able to keep a good job, and I ended up taking that job. And I still got some airbags here, and my thing, rather than take them home and hoard them, because there's like this big fine if you get caught with one. My thing was do them off on the clock. I'm getting do it off at home and show off, or get paid $16.50 an hour to blow off bombs. What are you gonna do? So I built a control box that had two switches, momentary, they were toggles that had springs on them. So you had to hold both of them forward to make contact, and it had a fuse. So there was no way that this thing could accidentally misfire. You had to press both of these spring loaded switches forward to make contact. There was just a box with a fuse, double switches, and it had two wires coming out that would go to a car battery, and then two like heavy gauge wires that ran out, medium heavy, like 18 gauge wire or something. And it had a couple of heavy duty alligator clips on the end that were insulated. So even if they touched, it wouldn't make contact. And that was how I handled it. Um, Oftentimes people would come, "What are you doing?" And I would constantly be explaining myself until everyone finally figured it out and stayed away. What you would do is you would make sure that the vent was facing up, because they would take off like a bullet out of a gun if you did it wrong and had the vent facing the ground. They would just go flying up in the air so you couldn't see them, and then come flipping down. And they're heavy. It's a pipe. It's that weighs a couple of pounds. Like if that thing clocked you, you'd be hurting. And the one time I was out there doing it, and there was a red Infinity that had just come back from the body shop. They were washing it. It still had water on it, like the porter was supposed to come out and finish drying it or whatever. And my nephew came walking up. "Oh, what are you doing, airbags?" And he got his phone out to film it. And I spaced out because it was my nephew, and I didn't look. And I just, "Oh yeah, watch this." And I put it down, and it was facing down, and it lifted. It just disappeared, and I got the feeling like I was going to shit my pants, and I threw myself over the car, judging from where it went up, because it ripped through there was a tree. There was a huge maple tree or whatever, and it shredded through these leaves, and I saw the leaves coming down, and they were right where that car was, this red car. So I threw myself over the fender and hood and windshield like this, so the thing would hit me rather than take out the car. And it came down through it didn't touch the car, but it was close. And it went in between where the passenger side mirror and the door. That's where it came down, right in there. And as soon as it took off and lifted, my nephew turned around, and that was it for him filming. And man, the owner of that dealership would have been proud of me, seeing me throw myself up against that car with no regard for my personal safety. Anyway, it was coming up on my sister-in-law's 40th birthday, and my brother, typically always in the doghouse for his cocaine shenanigans, so he decided it would be a good idea to try to do 40 of the biggest airbags that he had. He had collected, they had these massive, they were the side impact ones, and they were like this. They were big, they were fatter, and they were really big. I think there might have even been 2 tubes. They were like massive ones. And he had 40 of them, and he said, "It's going to be your job to wire this up." And I'm like, how do you. So he spent a real lot of time prepping them. And then I had to have a run coming out from a power source. And he was like, "I want to use AC. I want to use AC." And I'm like, "No, we're not using AC. It's 12 volt DC. That's what it's, So I got 4 deep cell batteries because we worked for. At that time, we were working for AT&T, and they have those batteries for backup for the cable TV system. And I had I had 13 of them. Eventually, is how many I had. So I took 4 of them and wired it up with these real thick wires that went out to this thing, and he had done all the rest of the work. So all I had to do was tie into the main. There was 2 um, strands of wire that went out to these things. So I had some thick wire that ran back to some thicker wires that hooked into the battery. And I think it was all like we had 2 people, and you had to, each person had to take a real thick positive lead and touch that to the binding post. So we're at this party, everyone's there, um, and we're gonna do this bomb. It's like we're gonna sing to her, and then at the end of the song we do the bomb off. And it went off perfect. And when we did the bomb, it was 40 double side impact airbag. It was so fucking loud. It was the second loudest thing I ever heard in my life. The first thing was that aerial bomb. And it's debatable of whether it was louder because it was a different timbre, but it was so beautiful because they all lifted up. They came off the ground and made a circular pattern, like a spider. It looked like a spider. And there was a discharge of hot gas that went out of this circle. It was absolutely beautiful. I wish we would have filmed it. We didn't film it. But that was like everybody couldn't stop laughing for a while. For like a half hour, the whole party was just shit eating grins and couldn't stop laughing because it was so unbelievable. And everyone was secretly envious of my brother. Everyone knows he's got this cocaine problem. He's this horrible coke addict, and he's got these kids and everything. But that was that one moment where like everybody, even like all the old grandmas and grandpas, the church people, were really like envious and like admiring him that he had the like crazy enough to think to hook up 40 double side impact airbags and blow them up for his wife's 40th birthday. I mean, who would think of that? That's like what you're gonna do. 40 airbags. So yeah, my ears ringing today, and I figured that would be a good story time video talking about Bee's Chicken Ranch and Carol's 40th birthday party. 2 of the loudest explosions I ever witnessed. If I sat here and thought about it, I could tell stories about explosions. we did we did this acid bomb. It was a 3-liter bottle, and we weighted it down with buckets. The thing with doing an acid bomb in a 2-liter is that the plastic melts. And I got the idea that if we submerged them in water, especially got it down deep, there would be enough pressure where you could build up a lot more pressure, and then when it did rupture, it would be much more spectacular. And so we had 3 5-gallon buckets full of gravel, and we attached the bomb to that and lowered it down into the canal. And a cop came. Somebody had heard us doing them because they were echoing under the bridge. There's this incredible reverb, and we were throwing them out on top of the surface. And anyway, he's like, "What do you guys got on the end of that rope?" And we had to pull it up. He made us pull it up. And when it came up, it was like a whale. It was this huge, and it turned into this massive thing. It was all distended. It was like 13 feet long, like this, and it was like 6 feet around. It was a 3-liter that we had taped. wrapped fiber tape around it. Because if you take a 3 liter and you really tape it good with fiber tape, it'll take maybe 35 minutes before it finally goes off. It can't take the pressure anymore, and man, when it does, it's loud. It's loud. It's a lot louder than a normal 3 liter. But yeah, that pulling that thing up, we saw, whoa, this giant thing, and the cop. The cop, he loved it. The cop thought it was so cool. He's like, all right, wait a minute. How do you guys do this? He's like, what's involved? What's involved in this? And he's like taking notes. We're like, well, you get tin foil, you get a 2 liter bottle, and then you get toilet cleaner, acid. And he's like, acid. What about the acid? Who's got the acid? What are you guys doing? Drugs? We're like, no, it's hydrochloric acid or sulfuric acid. You can get, you know, Sunnyside makes it. Really, really bad news. And it was right before the 4th of July, so you know he wanted to know, how do you make these bombs that are like louder than an M80 that don't cost anything? You can just keep making them and doing them, and it's loud and good fun. But yeah, this is all for entertainment purposes. None of this stuff ever happened. I'm making it all up because I've been drinking. And don't ever play around with any explosives. You'll end up like me with your ear ringing permanently. All right, you guys. Thanks for joining me for Storytime today. Peace.